attending today's webinar. Today's topic is on 5 reasons to automate employee time tracking with presenter David Moyer from About Time. Just a couple of housekeeping items before we get started. Everyone is in listen-only mode, so if you do have questions, please type them into the questions box on the screen, and we will be happy to address them at the end of the session. This webinar will be recorded, and we'll email out a copy to everyone later today. I will now turn it over to you, David.
Thank you, Krista, and thank you for taking the time this morning to attend this webinar. We're going to cover this off, a topic that I think is becoming more and more predominant in the industry right now. And so we're going to just talk about 5 reasons to automate employee time tracking. So let's just jump in right away. First of all, here's the problem we're all trying to solve. We have scattered people and information all over the place, and this is becoming more and more needed in the industry to be able to collect data from those scattered people and to collect scattered information and get that into the office quickly. The problem is that we're solving these problems from a mobile standpoint one at a time. And what ends up happening is a lot of that data out there becomes disconnected. And our goal with WorkMax is to actually connect that data to make sure that you have one platform, one login, one vendor to go to get all of that information for your remote data. Here are the challenges that we're finding that people are accepting. And matter of fact, this is not just coming from the people that we deal with on a daily basis and over the past 13 years, but we're hearing this in studies. Paper time cards. On average, the American Payroll Association says people doing manual time cards are exaggerating their time by 41 minutes a day per employee. That equates to 4.5 hours of lost time due to exaggerated time. And so what we're trying to do is solve that by giving you different ways to collect time to make sure that that time is more accurate inside of there. On top of that, there's a lot of manual data loss. 1 to 8% errors in manually transposing time information off of a timesheet into a payroll system. So there's a lot of rework happening in there. And I know we've got a lot of people that are really accurate on that, but it's just happened. We have human errors inside of there. It also takes us to review and audit those times for people to look at that and say, hey, is this time accurate and so forth. It's taking 5 to 6 minutes for each time card, and just start looking at that and extrapolating that over how many employees you have, how many time cards you have to go. And then, of course, we've got that 43% of hourly workers exaggerate time work. They say they came in at 7:30, but they came in at 7:42. I took a lunch from 12 to 12:30, but in fact, I take it to 12:42. And so what we're doing is we're finding out that we have people that are not working the hours that they say they're working. And so to give you an example of a company that did this, we had a company that I met with recently. They had 134 employees, so you can kind of proportion that to the size of the company that you are. They implemented a time tracking system with us. And I met with his company and about 25 other companies, which was a consortium of companies that shared best practices. And I asked him, I just came on and asked, how much money did you save by implementing a time tracking system? He said, in the first year, he said, I know exactly what it is. The first year I implemented this, I saved $440,000, 21% of my payroll. Everybody gasped, how did you do that? He said, well, I started paying people for when they started working. Before, he said, they would put in a timesheet that was 8 hours or 8 hours and 15 minutes. He said, nobody's ever seen a timesheet that said 8 hours and 3 minutes. And he said, so I started paying them for when they started working. My payroll went down. He said, then what I found out is that my payroll started to go back up again because people started to come to work knowing, hey, I'm going to get paid when I show up, so I'm going to start showing up earlier and leaving later. And he said, and then I found out another thing. I started going from an average of 4.5 hours of productive time in a day to 6.5 hours. So even though my payroll didn't go back up to where it was before, my productivity increased exponentially over what I was doing before. So I was able to do more work, get more jobs, and keep fewer people. Not that we don't want to keep fewer people, but I was just having more productive time with my employees. So these are the experiences that are happening out there. So when we talk about reasons to do this, number one is this. You can process your payroll faster and more accurately. You're going to get the information in with a time card, with an electronic time card or a time capture system. You're going to get that information into the office immediately. You don't have to wait till the end of the week to get a timesheet. It's there for you. It's also, with a good time tracking system, you'll be able to expedite your time reviews and approvals. How do we get that? Do we have to go and look through timesheets, or are there ways that we can really fine-tune where we need to look and so forth, so approvals can be much faster on this thing? And of course, we're eliminating manual processes, and we'll talk about that here in just a second, because we integrate directly with Sage 300 and 100, along with other accounting systems out on the marketplace. It simplifies its tracking and managing mobile employees, and that's what we want to do. We want to get that data out there. We want to give them a simple process where they can enter time, where they don't have to sit there and go, boy, what was I doing? But they can enter it right away, what they're doing. And of course, number 5, we just talked about that. It integrates with payroll and accounting systems so that you can get that accurate labor and job cost. There's no manual rekeying and so forth. So not only are we going to, our goal is to save that exaggeration of time issue, it's to automate this and get this into your payroll much quicker and without any rekeying of data inside of it. So that's why we created WorkMax. Now, WorkMax is a modular system. We're going to focus on the time today right now, but it does have other modules in there. It's got time, assets, forms, service, and insights. All the modules in WorkMax were designed to run standalone. So time can run by itself, assets can run by itself, forms can run by itself. But each one of those was also designed to integrate with each other. And if you wanted the whole package of all of those things, we call that the complete suite. Now, like I said, we're going to focus on WorkMax Time. And so the question is, why WorkMax Time? Well, our goal is to absolutely transform and streamline the way you manage your time and labor across your workforce with WorkMax Time. And so we're going to jump into some key features of time, and we're actually going to show you the time capture to see if this applies to your business out there. First of all, time. Here's one of the reasons why. We give you multiple ways to collect and allocate time. Now, why is that important? Well, you know what? A lot of systems come in and they say, this is the way you collect time on our product. This is the only way. And so we give you the ability to have multiple ways to collect time. So our timekeeping solution fits your business rather than you having to fit a timekeeping solution. And by the way, you can mix and match these across your organization because different people in your organization may collect time different ways, and so you need multiple ways across your organization. We give you that capability. We give you the ability to do overtime rules, pay group rules, shift rules. We give you some really, really nice tools on that, oftentimes more powerful than your accounting system can do on the overtime rules. And if we have some time, we'll talk maybe just a little bit about that. But it gives you that full scope of information in here. And by the way, even though we've got all of this configuration capabilities in the background, these pay groups and overtimes, we made this thing extremely simple. We also tried to make this as intuitive as possible. When you get into this particular application and we start showing it to you, hopefully you'll see what we did to make this thing happen. We created an intuitive design, as intuitive as we could make this. And the way we did that is we took 120 days of just taking screenshots and putting in front of people and saying, this is what we want to accomplish. Does this screen make sense? And we did 120 days of just design before we even wrote our first line of code on this thing. So ultimately, you get to be the vote as to whether or not it's intuitive or not, and hopefully you'll see that. So even though we're very powerful on the back end, we're very simple in how we do it. We also track GPS locations. Every time you put a job in, we'll actually let you put a geofence around that and say, hey, where is this job located? We'll automatically calculate longitude and latitude. When people clock in and put time in on their job, we'll capture their location and say, oh my goodness, they were outside the geofence or they were inside the geofence, and it will actually flag you and you'll actually see that information on your screen as you look at the time records themselves. On top of that, it's going to integrate with your payroll, both Sage 100 and 300, and I think that that's probably the majority of people on this are Sage 100 and 300, although we do have integrations with other payroll systems out there. This is hosted on Amazon Web Services. This is a web-based application. It is hosted on Amazon Web Services with the latest security on this thing. And so if you're wondering, Amazon Web Services is probably the premier place to host a web application right now. So this is not hosted in some back room somewhere, and it's in the best place that you can have it. There's two pieces of the software. There is the Control Center, which is the web-based application. It will work across any web browser. Doesn't matter. Matter of fact, it will work on your web browser, on your phone, or your iPad if you need to get into the actual Control Center portion of this. We do have a specific application that we've developed for the Android and the iOS device. So when I'm entering data into the system, I can capture that data through the web interface. So if I've got a tablet browser, Safari or anything like that, or my laptop, whether it be a Mac or whether it be a PC, I can get and enter data directly into the web interface. However, for mobile employees, we've got that mobile application that they can enter data in through the field. Now, the value of having that mobile application out there is that we realize that there are some times where people don't have signals. And that's not a problem. Our mobile devices will run connected or disconnected. Even though there may not be a signal there, you'll be able to capture all the data all the time. If you wanted to do forms and so forth, you'll still be able to fill out those forms. Once you do get into a place where you do have a signal, you can connect that back up into the Control Center. When you do manage your data, it's very simple. You do go to the Control Center, and as long as you have an internet connection, no matter where you are, as long as you've been given the rights to access that information, you can do that. So if you're out in the field and someone says, hey, I need to get into Control Center, you can log in right through your mobile device, your browser. If you're at home and you need to look something up later on, you can look it up on your home computer. There's no limitation because it is a web-based application in there. Once again, it's all rights-based and privilege-based, so it only allows the people who have been given the privileges to do that, to get information to them. So with that, let's jump in and take a look at the software. Okay? We'll jump out here to WorkMax. This is WorkMax. This is my WorkMax screen. Based upon the applications you own, you'll see them listed up here: Time, Assets, Forms, Service, Insights. We're going to focus on Time in this last little 15 minutes, so we're going to go in here. I'm going to select the Time module. When I do that, it opens up the Time editor. Any time that's ever been entered into the system, whether it be in the office, because we have the ability to do time clock where people can clock in right in the office if you want to on the web browser, or if they're doing this on a job around the block, or even something halfway around the world, we're going to capture all of that information here. Okay? And so what I'm going to do is I'm going to run through very quickly the 3 ways that we collect time, and then there's a whole lot more we can do beyond that. If there's interest on this to dive into this deeper, we'll be glad to show that to you. So what I'm going to do at this point is I'm going to pull up my mobile device, and it should come up on the screen here shortly. I'll resize this down just a little bit here because sometimes with the presentation like this, it really chops off the bottom on this stuff. Okay, so now what I've got here is I've got my mobile device here. I'm going to pin in. I'm going to use a PIN code, and we can do a PIN code, and we can do barcodes. There's several ways to do authentication to get into this thing. Based upon the rights that I've been given as an employee, the menu selections will come up here appropriately. I've got time clock, time sheet, time review, assets, and so forth. If I had an employee that all I wanted them to see was time clock, I can specify that when they pin in, that's all they see. On this particular scenario, I'm going to select time clock, and you'll see my name listed here. At this point, I can select my name. I can also go inside of here and say, I've got other employees. So I may be a supervisor that says, I have a crew, I'm going to clock them in with me. I can set and select them on the fly, or you can see the little group tabs at the very top. I can actually set up my own group up there as well. Now, in this particular scenario, I'm just going to select myself. So I'll go ahead and hide those other ones, and I'm going to say, I'm going to go ahead and clock in. Now, by the way, all of your jobs, your cost codes are coming straight from 100, 300, or whatever accounting system you're using. Should you want to change it, you can see I've got Lone Peak Renovation at the top in the green as my default job. If I need to set a different job, I can pull this up. This job list will come, like I said, it's directly from your accounting system, And it will only show the job that I've been given rights to see. So I don't have to have every single job in the system. So I'm going to go back in here and say, yep, I'm at Lone Peak Renovation. That's correct. I'm going to go in here and I'm going to clock in. When I do that, it then presents me a list of cost codes. What cost code are you working on? Same exact process. This comes directly from your accounting system. Once again, I can see access to everything, but I may not want to see access to everything, and I can actually restrict that list down so that if I'm a cement mason, all I see is a cement mason. If I'm an electrical and all I do is rough in, then just give me rough in information on the electrical side of this thing. I'm going to do drywall at this point, so I'm going to select drywall. At this point, I can confirm this. I can look at the screen on here. I may want to put a note in here. It's very simple. I can go in here and type in here, this is voice to text. So instead of your people having to go in here and type this in here, I can talk directly into this. Once I'm done with this, I confirm that, and now I've got that timestamp. Now, if I go back over here into my time editor, what you'll see is instead of 3 time entries over here, I now have a 4th one. You'll see that I have David Moyer, came from my iPad Air, tells me I was in Lone Peak Renovation. You also see I've got a different cost, like my cost code drywall. Notice I've got an in stamp, but I have no out stamp. The reason why is I'm still working on that. Over here on the left, it gives me some visual cues as to what that means. I have a stamp here that says this is an incomplete entry. You'll also see that this one says there's a note on it. This came from the field, and I also have a GPS stamp. And anytime I want, I can click on that and come down here, and I can see that GPS stamp right here on the bottom. And you can see that, in fact, I clocked in right there at that particular spot, okay? And it was right inside the geofence because that's where my job is. Anytime I want, I can click on this thing, and I can see notes and see exactly what the notes are in here as well. So whether I'm an individual or whether I'm a crew leader, I can actually do that live. So now what happens, should I come back in a little bit later and switch tasks or job cost codes, I come back into my mobile device, I pin back in and say, we're going to switch tasks. I go back into time clock, I'll select myself, I'll hit in, I'll go down here and I'll just change my task to painting. I'll go ahead and confirm that, and now I've changed tasks. So let's go back over here and I'll show you what this looks like back in the time editor. So instead of having 1 timestamp extra, I've got 2. You'll notice that that first timestamp that had the little red arrow on it, or red flag on it, originally this one goes away because now I have an out stamp. You'll also notice I have an in and an out stamp on that one, and that the out stamp, I did not clock out of drywall before I clocked into painting. The system's intelligent enough to know you clocked into painting, therefore I'm going to automatically clock you out of this, but I'm going to highlight this saying the computer generated that out stamp. You did not do that manually. Now, once again, you've got a GPS stamp. Had I clocked in outside of the geofence, these little globes would be red, and you'd actually see that these guys clocked out of the geofence. It will show you exactly where they were and that they weren't inside the parameters of the job. At the end of the day, when I'm done with this, I merely go out here and I say, we're going to go ahead and clock out. I select time clock, select my name, hit the out stamp, confirm that, and now I'm out. Now, when I go back over here, and you'll actually see in the time editor, just so you can see the difference, I have 2 completed records over here. You notice that second record now has an out stamp, but it's not highlighted. The reason why that's not highlighted, of course, is because I physically gave it the out stamp. This was a system generated. This was a physical one. So the power of this thing is that if you have employees that go from job to task to task, instead of them at the end of the day or end of the week going, what did I do? Have them do this at the end of the day. All of their time is already divided up and ready to go for job costing purposes. Okay? So that's one way to do it. Now, we also have sometimes where people sit there and say, you know what, I don't necessarily want these guys, there's no way that these guys are going to be able to clock in every time they change a task. I do want them to enter their time when they come in the door and clock out when they end at the end of the day. But then I want to have a supervisor go in there and say, hey, let's divide this up as to what they did during that day. So you notice I had these 3 employees at the top, Jen, Pete, and John. These guys clocked in real time. okay? And these are time from yesterday. I can see that they clocked in real time. You can see that Jen clocked in at 6:30, Pete clocked in at 6:33, John clocked in at 6:32, and their out stamps were slightly different, pretty close to the same. But you can see that that was real time. I'm going to pay them for when they worked. Now, some people sit there and go, I don't get that crazy on this thing. I would like just to round it the closest 5 minutes or 10 minutes or so forth. We have that capability in here should you want to. But for those people who want to actually pay real time, you can do it at this level. Now, I need to take these. You guys started maybe with drywall, but I want to actually go in here and divide the rest of their day. So I'm going to highlight these 3 employees, and I'm going to use this little feature down here called allocate. I'm going to go down here, and I have a graphical view of what they did. I'll hit this new button, and it says, all right, tell me what they did for the first part of the day. Well, from 6:30 to 9 a.m., they actually did, we'll take it down here, and they did, oops, let's go down here and pick, we actually did drywall. And we can even put production units in here. So if you want to track this, what they did, we can put production units in and say they did 1,200 square feet. It gives me a graphical representation of that time portion of their day. Matter of fact, I can even take this and say it really needed to be like 9:30, so let's just actually move that to 9:30. I'm going to go in here and say, let's take the next part of that day and say from 9:30 to 2 p.m., they worked on something else. So they went from finishes to painting, and they did 800 square feet of painting. We'll go ahead and save that. And then we'll go ahead and finish up the day, and we'll say the last part of the day is 3:55 p.m., and these guys are pretty talented, so we finish this up and we go to tile, okay? And they did 500 square feet of that. Now, a lot of people sit there and ask the question, okay, you started at 6:30. Did it change everybody's in stamp and their out stamp? And the answer is no. It picked it up right where it left off. You can see over here, Jen started at 6:30. It still kept John's timestamp at 6:32, 6:33, and kept their out stamp. It just encompassed that portion of their day. So now I've got this all divided up. When I save this, I go back up into the time editor. Here's what you'll see. You'll see that those 3 time records are now 9 time records. I've allocated those all up based upon different cost codes, different timestamps, and so very simply, I had real-time clock in, real-time clock out, and I was able to take and divide that up for job costing later on. So to kind of review this, the first way we do time on here is real-time. Clock in the morning, change tasks. Each time I change tasks or jobs during the day, I can do that. At the end of the day, clock out, it's automatically divided up. Second way I showed was clocking in the morning, clocking out at night, and being able to divide that up later. So those are the 2 kind of real-time labor and real-time with allocation. Now, there's some people out there that say, you know what, I just want to do my digital timesheets. Okay? I just want to go back to the timesheet function and put time into the system. Well, we have that functionality as well. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to take you out to the 3rd way we do time. And we'll pull up the mobile device at this point. I'm going to resize that down. As you can see, our mobile device will run in portrait or landscape mode, so you can switch it either way. In this particular one, I'm going to use the landscape. I'm going to go inside of here and say, I've got companies that say, my foreman puts in time for his crew at the end of the week, and then sends it in. So let's emulate that particular process. I'll go in, and I'm the supervisor. Instead of going into time clock, I'm going to go into time sheet. I'm going to select the employees that I'm going to put in time at the end of the week. And by the way, this could be end of the day, end of the week, whatever you want to do. I will then hit the next button down on the bottom of the screen. I can copy from a previous sheet, or I can start one right from scratch. Let's say this is for the week of the 16th, okay? I can say, yes, they typically worked on Lone Peak renovation inside of here. I'm going to change the date in here to January 16th and say this is the start of my date for my timesheet. And they typically started working at 7 a.m. So, and by the way, you can set these as default. I'm just saying you can change these very quickly, and they typically work a 9-hour day. They started, their typical cost code they started was on drywall. And so now I've got all my parameters set up inside of here. I'm going to hit the create timesheet down at the bottom of the screen. I now have my 3 employees here ready to start looking at their time. Now, everything that you see up here on the green, you'll actually see that everything on the green applies all the way down to the employees. And you look at that and go, well, that's great, but that's not what they did all week. You're right, because on Tuesday, they didn't even work at Lone Peak Renovation. So I'm going to go on that little timesheet, hit the Lone Peak with my finger, and I'm going to change that to Costco Orem. Now you can see that everything on Tuesday, Costco Orem, 7 a.m. drywall, applies all the way down to all these employees. And you say, that's great, but they didn't all do that all day long. So matter of fact, on Wednesday, I'm going to go down to Don Phillips. And you can see Don Phillips has got 9 hours there. I'm actually going to go change that from 9 hours and say, Don actually worked 12 hours. Okay? And he didn't work just at one location. He actually worked at multiple locations, multiple Costcos. So there's a little arrow next to that 12. I'll hit that arrow, and I'll say, what did he do? Well, he only worked 5 hours at that job before I sent him off and he did something else. So now you can see up at the top, I've got 12 total hours that Don worked, but he's got 7 of them I've got to put somewhere else. So I hit the plus button here, and I'm going to say he did work at Lone Peak Renovation. He went to the office renovation, and he didn't do drywall. Whoops, hang on here. Let me go back onto that because I missed that. Now, he didn't do drywall. He actually went down here and he did painting. So now I've got that, so you can see that I've got it all allocated, 5 hours on this job, 7 hours on this job doing this and so forth. And I can take that and divide it up at as many jobs in Costco as I need to. So when I save this now, I've got this all done. Now, depending on how you do this, because I can do approvals in the control center or I can do them out here, I can go and say, Bill, I need you to look at your time. Are you good with your time? Absolutely. So Bill can come over here and actually sign off on his time out there. As soon as he signs off, you'll notice there's a little check mark next to Bill's name. I can then go and say, Clark, are you good with your time? Yes, I'm good with my time. Go ahead and sign off on this. Have Clark sign off on that. Super. How about you, Don? Are you good with your time? Yes, I'm good with my time. We'll go ahead and have Don sign off on his time as well. So accept that. Now that I got everybody signed off, I, as a manager, can do that. So I'm just going to highlight those. I'm going to do a manager sign off, and I'm going to go in here and say, this is my sign off inside here. So I accept that. So now I've got everything done. I've saved. I've done my timesheet. I look at this. This is fantastic. And I can say, oh, okay, do we want to send this up? Oh, I want to look at one more thing. So you can go right back here and do a time review. Look at that timesheet. You can go back in there as many times as you want before you send it up there and say, yeah, we need to make some changes or whatever it is. When you're ready to do this, we can save this timesheet. We say send those time entries back up into my control center. Okay? So when I come back over here, what you're going to see in my timesheet back over here is you'll actually see all of those time records from the 16th on down. So hang on here. I'll come back up here. Let's go back on my ends. And you'll actually see all those time records came across, even the ones where Don Phillips came over here and we divided it and went 5 and 7. You also notice next to each one of them there's a little check mark saying that there's employee approvals and manager approvals. If I want to come down here, you can look at the sign-offs down here on the bottom, and you'll even see the signatures that are coming across from the mobile devices out there. Now, once you've got your time collected, we can run the overtime. We can enter this right over into your accounting system, and all of the information is collected and ready to process for payroll purposes. So once again, to kind of regroup on this thing and go back to the presentation and look at this, just remember, these are some things based upon what we just showed you right here. Actually, let's go back on this. So we'll go back up to this previous screen here. Sorry. Hang on. Thought we were back up here. Hang on. This will help you process payroll faster because all of that information can directly go into your accounting system with no manual entries. Okay? Time reviews can be expedited. We eliminate all that the manual processing. The mobile application is simple to use and intuitive. And of course, we're going to send this right into your payroll system. So with that, I want to turn this back over to Krista and say thank you guys very much for your time. If you want more information on this, please contact Accordant. And if you want to look at this deeper, glad to get into this deeper with you. Accordant can help facilitate that. And we'll just turn this back over to Krista. Thank you.
Okay, thank you.